Good afternoon from semi-sunny Osaka. It's September 8th. My name is J.S. Frankel, writer, dreamer, and semi-idiot, most of the time anyway. Okay, yesterday I spoke about how to write the beginning of your book. And it doesn't really matter what genre you write. All you have to do is think in the beginning of your book, how do I start the conflict? And there has to be conflict. If there's no conflict, then there's no story. So the conflict can be anything, as I said. It can be passing a test. It can be finding a girlfriend or a boyfriend. It can be money woes, family problems. The bully's going to beat you up at 3 o'clock, and oh God, what do I do now? So it can be anything you dream up. It doesn't really matter. The point is, you have to get the conflict set out, preferably within the first 5 pages, and even better in the first two. Now, you don't have to dump everything at once. Just put it in bits and pieces over the ensuing chapters. But the basic conflict should be laid out within the first 2, maybe 3 pages at the most. I say 5, but actually less is better, to be honest. That's my opinion. Uh, get the conflict and move on from there. Today's video talks about the middle of your book, and this is where the bulk of the information is going to come. So you have to go from the initial conflict. Here, you're doing more exposition. Now, again, you shouldn't info dump. You should drop it in bits and pieces over the chapters. You can introduce new characters, get rid of old characters, introduce more sub-conflicts if you want to. And in fact, that's actually a better idea because life is not just one conflict, it's many. So, as an example, in a story I wrote, Mr. Taxi, the main character, Harry, he's 18 years old, it's the future, and he's working on an interstellar starport. His stepfather destroyed a taxi, and Harry has to pay off the debt. So, the main conflict is paying off the debt. But along the way, he gets involved with smugglers, a pretty girl, a pretty alien girl whom he likes. He has conflicts at work with his fellow coworkers. They're all aliens. He's only the second human on the starport, and quite frankly, the aliens don't like humans. So he has to learn how to make friends. Now, all of these tie together, and I don't do them in sections. First you deal with conflicts with the other aliens, then he deals with his wannabe girlfriend, then he deals with paying off the debt, then he deals with the smuggling. I don't do that. I just combine them all and give bits and pieces throughout the chapters. And there, I think, if I remember correctly, it took about 10 chapters. No, actually less, 8. About 8 before the final conflict came in, that being who the smugglers were, how could he stop them, and where would his relationship go in the future with this alien girl? Her name's Shay, short for Shayala. And with this kind of more exposition idea, again, don't throw everything in at once. Because if you do, you'll be called an info dumper and the critics will be right. And I've made this mistake in the past, and that's why I'm doing this video so that none of you makes the same dumbass mistake I made. Info dumping is akin to overwatering a plant, and in the plant world, that's known as murder. So don't murder your story, don't info dump. Give bits and pieces throughout the chapters. It doesn't have to be a lot of information. That's the cool thing. It can be 2 or 3 paragraphs at the most, interspersed with dialogue, some action, some personal thoughts. It can be anything. But as long as you don't info dump, you will be okay. Now, the second thing to understand about the middle part, being the bulk, is not only does the character have to realize, the main character, have to realize that something is wrong, that they have to resolve the conflict, they also have to show growth. Now, that can be physical growth, it can be mental growth, emotional growth. It can mean standing up to the bullies. It could mean talking back to your boss at work. It can be going up to that pretty girl or good looking guy you like and saying, hey, how about going out on a date? And then you can explore the date. Does it go well? Does it go badly? Do you decide to see each other again? All of these things, excuse me, all of these things can make up the bulk of your novel's middle part. Now, how long should that be? Again, I do roughly 7 pages. That's single spaced, roughly 635 words a page, not always. And so I'm looking at 42, between 4 and 4,000, 4,000 to 4,200 words per chapter. So multiply that by 7 or 8, you can come up with a result. That's going to be the bulk of your book. And this is where you have to show very clearly how the character is changing. And this is where I want to sort of branch off into the show, not tell scenario. There's nothing wrong with telling, actually. I used to think it was terrible, but actually it's not, as long as you keep it to a bare minimum. I tend to tell somewhat at the end of each chapter, but I do it in the form of leaving it as an unanswered question or a mini cliffhanger or something along those lines. I don't go overboard on the telling because, quite frankly, it's boring. And that's what you shouldn't do either. So, how do you show the growth? Well, again, let's go back to Mr. Taxi. The main character, Harry, he hates his life on the starport. He has no friends save the only other human on the starport, a guy named Rhodey, who's the head dispatcher for the interstellar taxis. He's wondering where his relationship with Shay, this alien girl, will go, and he's involved with a smuggling ring. Not only that, he has to learn how to make friends with the other aliens because, quite frankly, being only one of 2 humans up there, it's sort of lonely for him, and he acknowledges that. So, how did I show it? Actually, I showed it not in what he did, but in what another alien species did. In a nutshell, he goes to this planet. The people there are like cat people. They have sort of human faces, but cat-like bodies. They invite him to sit down for a meal after he delivers their cargo to them. And at first he's shocked. Why would they ask me, he thinks. Why would they ask a human, somebody they don't know? And the leader of these cat people says, "Well, you're our guest. We want to make you feel welcome." So Harry realizes they don't care if he's an alien or not. They accept him, they like him, they give him a couple of little trinkets to take with him when he goes back to the starport, and he realizes life doesn't have to be the way he envisioned it in such a negative manner. So he decides on his own to invite some of the other alien cab drivers out for lunch. Let's do lunch. And slowly and gradually, he wins them over. And he does it simply by buying them lunch and talking to them. What's your problem with being up here? What are your grievances? How can we make things better by working together? That kind of thing. And over the course of 2 or 3 chapters, which also includes a terrific action sequence called Danger Zone, I'm very proud of that chapter actually, he wins their trust. And he wins the respect of most of the other drivers, as well as the um, other drivers of other interstellar vehicles who don't really like the cab drivers to begin with because they're considered scum of the universe. They're not, but that's what they're considered. So over time, he wins their trust. And again, how did I show that? By having him talk to the other drivers, by having him go to their worlds and experiencing life on their terms, not his. And other people in the novel, they recognize it. Rhodey, his dispatcher, recognizes it. Shay, his girlfriend, she grows closer to him. Not physically, just emotionally. It's a YA novel after all. Uh, She realizes that and gives him sort of like, a thumbs up, good work, good job, let's keep it going. And to me, that was the best way to show what was going on. At the same time, I was also showing how much deeper he was getting into the smuggling racket. And a couple of times he almost got pinched by the interstellar police, who are sort of nasty cockroaches, to be honest. Literally, they're cockroaches. Uh, he starts to regret making his decision, but he knows he has to follow it through to the end because still he has a huge amount of debt to pay off and he doesn't know any other way. But he does have regrets. And again, that's part of his growing up. That's part of his character becoming more fully fleshed out. And if there's any advice I can give you, show the character changing, not just by his or her own realizations, but also by what other people say, what they do, how they react, and so on. Once you do that, you're going to have a much better character. If it's a guy, he'll be more sympathetic. Same deal with a woman. Doesn't really matter. Gender doesn't matter. You need to build up sympathy for your characters. And even if you don't have sympathy, you can understand more fully why they do what they do. Okay. Uh, I'll give you a perfect example of a very evil character who actually becomes more relatable over time. And this is not in the book, but in the movie. That's Silence of the Lambs. Now, the book was excellent. I enjoyed it. But the movie was really terrific, mainly because of the second act, or the middle third of the book, so to speak. You see Hannibal Lecter going back and forth with Jodie Foster's Clarice Starling character. They're doing the quid pro quo. Sorry, my mouth isn't working properly. And they're going back and forth, revealing more details about each other as they go along. Now, it doesn't alter the fact that Hannibal Lecter is a mass murderer. It doesn't alter the fact that he is irretrievably evil in many ways, but it does build up some sympathy for him, in my opinion. I don't like the character, but I can understand why he does what he does, and he's doing it because the character of Clarice clearly fascinates him. And excuse me, because she fascinates him, he reveals a tiny spark of humanity, something normal and good and decent. Not much. He's still irretrievably evil by the end of the movie, and quite frankly, Anthony Hopkins is terrific. But in that, in those moments, in the second act of the movie, so to speak, you can see him growing in a way as a character, and you can see her maturing as well. And that's why it is such an excellent movie. It's the most fascinating battle of wits since In the Heat of the Night, that starred Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger, and that was a terrific film too. So your characters have to grow, and you do it by showing how they react. How do they grow? Do they grow emotionally? Do they grow physically? You decide. If you want them to be real characters, you have to show them growing somehow. Something can trigger it. In a novel I'm editing now, the main character's mother is murdered. So he has to grow. He has to grow up. He has to man up. He has to be stronger because this was his mother whom he loved. And he has no father. His father died many years ago. So do all that, and you're going to have a very, very solid middle. If you have a dynamic opening third of your book, the first act, so to speak, like in a play, if you have a dynamic opening act and an interesting, plausible, relatable to the characters middle of the book, chances are you're going to finish off on a high note. And I'll get to the finishing off part in another installment. So, from Semi Sunny Osaka, this is J.S. Frankel, YA author, signing off, and have yourself a great day.